All right. Looks like we are live here on Jamsville on YouTube. Happy Friday, everyone. Today is Friday, April 21st, and it's 10:14 a.m. My apologies for starting a few minutes late. I was having some bizarre technical difficulties, which hopefully will not continue throughout the rest of the stream. But anyway, so today we are going to be talking about why I really dislike / hate the CAGED system for guitar. Now, this is something that a lot of people talk about. Yeah, I've seen so many videos, and I've seen some really good videos on the CAGED system, by the way. And I know that a lot of people really like it, and I know it works for a lot of people. But for me, it just never really worked at all. I remember when I was a kid trying to learn the CAGED system and just being so confused by it because I think it kind of overcomplicates things. And if you see, after we go through what I'm going to show you in the stream, you're going to see how if you learn the way that I was able to finally learn the fretboard, you'll be able to sort of reverse engineer the CAGED system for yourself. And once I learned in this way, I was able to actually finally understand how the CAGED system worked. But by that point, it was just kind of, it didn't really matter anymore, right? So I see we got some people in here. We got one person, actually. So I don't do a lot of lives on here. We got one person. So that one person that's watching, drop where you're watching from in the chat so that I'm not here all by my little lonesome streaming, showing you guys the problem with the CAGED system. All right, so, and if you have any questions, feel free to drop them in there. I want to kind of go back and forth between the lesson that I've planned out for you all and sort of make this like a Q&A as well. And after I'm done going through the material I've prepared for you, we will hang out a little bit more. We can talk and just do a little bit of a Q&A. Or if no one has any questions, then I'll hop right off as soon as we're done with the lesson material. So anyway, let's start jumping into it, I guess. So first, let me just explain to you what the CAGED system is, my understanding of it at least. So it's a way for mapping out the fretboard that involves 5 major chord shapes. And this would be C, A, G, E, and D. It's implicit in the name, the CAGED system. And these are all open chords that we all learn essentially like right when we start playing the guitar. So the C chord, and these are all right there on this sheet I'm showing on the screen. So the C chord, and then the A chord, and then the G chord, and then E chord, and the D chord. So the logic goes something like this. Essentially, for any major chord you find on the fretboard, let's say the C chord, you can actually find all of the rest of the inversions and places to play those notes that are in that chord by following this pattern, C, A, G, E, D. So for example, if I start with that C chord, let's actually go to the next page here. So if I start with the C chord, this might be a little bit confusing to check out. And of course, this is why, I don't like it that much. That's why I'm doing this stream. But I just want to try to explain it to you a little bit. So if you see that little box on the diagram above, this is your C shape, of course, because that's your open C chord. But then if we want to keep mapping out that chord, I can shift this box over a little bit. And now the box is over what we would call the A shape. So if we flip back up here, look at that A shape. Okay, that A shape looks very, very similar to this, okay? So it looks sort of just like your open A bar chord, but now you have to sort of think about it without open strings. And I think that's also one thing that's a little bit confusing, but that's definitely not the most confusing part of this system. So then, if we want to find the next set of notes that goes into a C chord, we would actually take that box and then move it over to the right. And now look, this is our G shape, okay? So if you notice, these notes right here, they kind of look like a G chord, but again, now we have all these notes that would be barred down. If we want to play them all at the same time, of course, they would be barred down on the 5th fret. Right? And the whole point of this, by the way, is not to necessarily like play that chord just like that, of course. That would be kind of hard, but it's just to conceptualize the fretboard and know where you are. So I'm just going to kind of blow through this because, like I said, it is pretty confusing. So now move that box over a little bit more, and now this is your E shape. So if you imagine all these notes here on the 8th fret, those are what would be your open strings in the E shape. So check out now that E shape. There's your open strings. And now this E shape on the only C chord section, it sort of looks like this. Actually, it creates a bar chord. So whenever you play like this major bar chord starting from the 6th string, that actually is essentially the same thing if you take an E chord and you go, okay, I'm going to move everything up a fret, but now I have to bar in order to cover what was an open string before. And then finally, move this box over one more time. This would be sort of like your D shape. So if you see there, let's get rid of this box for 1 second. So here, these notes that I'm putting little mini boxes over, you see that actually looks just like a D chord. And by the way, for that matter, if you count the original C shape that we had, that also kind of looks like a D chord. So while this all sounds really cool and it can be useful, here's the problem with it, okay? If I just give this to someone who doesn't understand anything from a hole in the ground about how the fretboard works, doesn't understand any of the notes in any of these chords, they're not really going to be able to do a good job memorizing it. Or at least I wasn't able to when I was at this stage in my playing. I just couldn't memorize this kind of thing. And especially, okay, great. Now I did that with one sort of chord, like a C chord. Well, now what else do I do with it? So now you got to figure out how to play any chord, any of the 12 different major chords that exist with this sort of CAGED system. And the problem is that you also need to understand where the roots are in any of these chords, just to be able to figure out where to put those in relation to the fretboard. So you can memorize all the shapes you want, but each chord has a root in it. And once you start actually learning all your chords all over the fretboard, you'll realize that the root's not always going to be in the 6th string or even on the 5th string. So I find a lot of people, they actually know pretty decently the notes that are on the 6th string or the 5th string, mainly from playing bar chords, right? They understand this. But what happens when the root isn't on the 6th or the 5th string? What if the root is on the 2nd string or the 3rd string? Well, now you're going to have a pretty rough time being able to navigate your way around. Now, of course, also people use these shapes to figure out their pentatonic scales and so on and so forth. Look, I just figured out the notes in the pentatonic scale and then started looking them up across the fretboard. So that's what I'm going to show you how to do is we're going to actually figure out some of these CAGED shapes, but we're going to actually figure out how they're constructed, okay? And that way, you're going to actually be able to memorize them. So a C major chord has the notes C, E, and G in it. Now, if you don't know how to build chords, let's just go over this really, really quickly. So first of all, you need to know what notes are in the key you're dealing with. Okay, so you should be able to name the notes that are in all 12 keys. If you can't do that, it's going to be really, really hard for you to do this. But even if you can't do that, we can start with the key of C major. So the key of C major, you should know, has 7 notes in it. Every single major key and minor key has exactly 7 notes in it. So those are the notes that we have. So we have C, D, E, F, G, A, and B. And so those are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Okay? So the way that we build a chord is all we're going to do is take the first note that we want to build the chord on. Okay, so whenever we build a chord, we are building it off of actually one note. So we're going to build it off of the C note because we want to build some sort of C chord, right? So once you've figured out the note that you want to build a chord from, it's very simple. What we're going to do is skip the next note in the scale. So now we're going to X out D for a second. We're going to take E, and then we're going to skip F, and now we take G. Okay, let's actually take those X's off because that's going to start to get confusing. So we're going to skip D, go to E, and then we're going to skip F, and we're going to go to G. Okay, it's that simple. So now we know all the notes that go in a C chord. So now if we do the really, really simple and easy and basic step of actually knowing what notes are on the fretboard, now we can just find those notes and we're going to actually come up with a lot of the same shapes. We can also come up with other shapes. That's kind of more down the line, but we're going to come up with these same shapes, but now we're going to actually understand, oh, that's why these shapes look like this, because they could never look another way. It's not just a random piece of information I'm memorizing. So for those of you who don't know the notes that are on the guitar fretboard, that's why I put this right here. So actually, these are all of the natural notes that can be found on the guitar fretboard up to the 13th fret. Okay, those of you should know that once we get past the 12th fret, we just repeat. Every single thing that you're going to find in the guitar is just going to repeat once you get past the 12th fret. So let's just kind of limit ourselves for right now to just past the 12th fret because you're going to see some of the shapes are going to go up into the 13th fret. So what we're going to do is let's just find this basic C major chord of C, E, and G. Let's just find that starting from the 6th string. So where on the 6th string is there a C note? Oh yeah, look right there. There's actually a C on the 8th fret. So we're going to do this on our fretboard that's below here. So let's just drop a C right there. And this, I don't know why this does that. Let's change that. There we go. We don't want our notes to be super teeny tiny. So there's a C there on the 6th string. Now, we have to find each of these different notes on a different string or else we're not going to be able to play them at the same time, right? So we can actually find C, E, and G all in the 6th string. But there's actually a G here, there's a C, and there's an E, open E, actually. But the problem is that we need to find them on different strings because, well, we can't play more than one note on the same string at once. So let's find where is there an E on the 5th string. So there's A, there's B, C, D. Oh, look, there's an E right there on the 7th fret of the 5th string. And actually, it just so happens, look, that's kind of close to where this C is, right? It's pretty easy to play. And then finally, we need a G note. And now we're going to be rocking and rolling. So let's go to the 4th string to find this G note. So there's D, E, F, and then G. Bingo. There's a G there on the 5th fret. So let's drop a G right there. Now this is our first C chord. And actually, if we start comparing up here to our little cage system diagram up there, we can actually see this is already part of one of those shapes, right? But now we just figure that out on our own. We figure that out by knowing the notes that are in this chord. Now, the cool thing is, guys, that because we are playing guitar, every single chord that we learn, we can move it up and down a fret. So you don't literally need to know every single one of the notes in every single chord. You should, but technically you could get away with it. What do I mean by that? Well, now we got this shape. First of all, now we know that with this particular C major chord, we know that the root is right here. So anytime you see a C, that's the root. And actually, over here, all the notes on the fretboard, I just highlighted those C's in green so that you could remember where the roots are in the key. Okay, so there's the root of the key and then there's the root of the chord. So if we take that, we can actually just highlight that. Let's say I wanted to play instead a B major chord, then I can just move that all down a half step, right? So I just want to make sure that root note, now it's lined up with B. Or if I want to play a G major chord, I can move it down so that this note on the 6th string is a G. So bingo, right there. Now that's a G major chord, G, B, D. Same exact shape, right? But now we understand the reason why that shape looks like that is because that's just where those notes are, okay? For me, it's a lot easier to memorize like that. So now that we've figured out this one chord, what we're gonna do is we're going to do something called inversion, okay? Inversion is pretty simple. What we're gonna do is we're actually gonna rearrange and start figuring out where other versions of these notes are. So the inversion process is super simple. We're going to take this C, we're actually gonna move it up an octave, but we have to move it up an octave to where the 3rd string is. So somewhere on the 3rd string. Now let's find a C on the 3rd string. Oh, look, there's a C right there on the 5th fret of the 3rd string. So look, let's move the C up there, boom. And now this is what we're gonna call our first inversion. So before we had this chord here, we had this C chord. This was what we would call root position. So whenever the root's on the bottom, we call that root position. And now this E is on the bottom, that we call the 3rd. So we call it the 3rd. Why? Because look, when we built the chord, see that E was the number 3. And then the G is going to be the 5th. So you see that G is the number 5. Okay? So this is what we call our first inversion. So let's just write that down so you all know that. So root position equals root on bottom. Okay, let's go ahead and erase this here. And then first inversion equals 3rd on bottom. Okay, so we're going to keep doing this. I'm just going to go along really quickly here. I actually have another video. It's called the right way to learn major triads. Go look it up on the channel, and I go through this a little bit more slowly, a little bit more in depth. So essentially, we're going to do this inversion again, and now here's our second inversion. So second inversion is when we have the 5th on the bottom. So let's go ahead and let's scroll down here a little bit. So second inversion equals 5th on bottom. Okay, so That's our second inversion. And then actually, if we do it one more time, look, there's a G there on the first string on the 3rd fret. So look, we're gonna move that G up an octave. Bing, bang, boom. We have now a root position. I almost said first inversion. Root position. So all those chords now combined, we get something like this. So those are actually all the notes that we worked out. So now if we fish through all of our notes there in the fretboard, we get this shape here, okay? So if we compare this to our CAGED system thing that we were looking at, it's kind of like a combination of 2 different CAGED system shapes. So this is where I started having like a really big revelation. Like when I played this second inversion chord here, that's when, even without studying the CAGED system or anything like that, that's when I started to realize, oh, wait a second. That kind of looks like an A chord, because in the A chord, it's the exact same fingering, but we do it down there, okay? So, of course, we can't play with the open strings. It'll sound... Actually, we could do that particular one with open strings. It actually makes an A minor chord. That's a whole different can of worms to get into. But anyway, so now the only step left is we need to find... Whoops, I don't want to do that. We need to find these same positions starting from the 6th string on with the other inversions. So instead of having C, E, G, let's actually put those back on there. So now we're going to start with the other lowest note that we can find on the 6th string. So in the 6th string, we can actually find an E here, okay, on the 12th fret. So let's go ahead and put an E there. And then we can find a G on the 5th string. And then we can find a C right here on the 10th fret of the 4th string. Okay? So now you're starting to see that we're constructing sort of the CAGED system from scratch ourselves. And this is a super duper important process for you to go through so that you actually understand why those CAGED system shapes look the way they do. If you don't understand why they look the way they do, it's going to be like 50 times harder to memorize them. So now we actually have this first inversion here. Remember, whenever E or the 3rd is on the bottom, we call that first inversion. Okay? So now we're going to do the same thing. We're going to essentially just keep adding on. So we can actually move this E up an octave. You see there's an E there. If we glance at our chart that's above, there's an E there on the 3rd string, 9th fret. So now that gives us a second inversion. And then we're going to flip this one up. G is going to go to 8th fret of the 2nd string. And then that's going to give us actually root position. So that's a really cool root position chord. And then C is going to move up an octave to the 8th fret of the 1st string. And now if we fill all those in, we get this sort of position shape. Okay? Okay, so let's do one more. We're actually now going to go have a second inversion, starting from the 3rd fret of the 6th string. So if we go here, we have G, and then C, and then E. You'll see that's actually sort of the bottom of your C shape. By the way, sometimes people, when they play this, quote, C shape, they don't even include that 6th string, because a lot of people don't play the C chord like that. You actually hear sometimes, like singer-songwriters, they'll actually throw that chord in there. They'll throw that note in there, that G lower so that it kind of fills out that chord a little bit more. It's kind of neat having this gigantic C chord like this. So now what we're gonna do is we're gonna go through that same process. So G moves up an octave, actually moves to the open string, right? So let's keep that G that was below. Now, actually let's get rid of it for just 1 second. C is gonna move up an octave. It's actually there. Look, check out that green C that's on the second string. So now we'll put our C there. And then finally E moves up an octave. That's also the open string. So if we fill out this whole entire thing, now all of a sudden, look, we got all of the CAGED shapes, but we actually now understand, hey, this is not just some random shape that I memorized just because somebody told me to, or because whatever, any other reason. The reason those shapes look like that is because that's where the notes are for those chords on the fretboard. And there's no other way that they could look any different unless, we tune the guitar differently. That would be the only other way we could sort of change that, I guess. But with that being said, let's move this camera just a little bit so you can see that fretboard better. So with that being said, we can also fill in some other things that sometimes are a little bit confusing when you're talking about the CAGED system. So we know that we also have an E note, of course, the open string there. And then we also have, see this shape right here from our quote C shape? Well, now we can just do everything up an octave. So there's an E here in the 12th fret. There's a C here on the 13th fret of the second string, and then there's a G here on the 12th fret of the third string. So as you can see, now we just worked out all of those shapes, and that's pretty much it. We worked them out, and now you can see when you go through this process, it didn't take that long, by the way. Look, we've been here for about 20 minutes. It didn't take that long. It's not like you have to spend, years and years and years trying to figure this out. But now all of a sudden, now you know your major triad shapes. And now if you want to figure the rest of them out, you can actually just move these up and down. So if I start, let's delete some of these just to make it a little bit less confusing. How about let's take the first sort of position that we ended up with when we started this whole process. Here we go. So we started with that root position, and then we got all the rest of the inversions, and we made this giant shape. So now, if I want to, I can find a B major chord, or we did B before. Let's do D major. So now I know where the root is in this chord. So there's actually two roots that we can find. There's a root here in the 8th fret 6th string, and then there's a root here in the 5th fret 3rd string. So any of those things, any of those areas of the shape, I can sort of pay attention to and go, okay, all right, I want to make sure I take this shape and line it up so that those root notes are in a D. Okay, well, right now I have a C major, and that C root note is on the 8th fret of the 6th string. So where would I find a D root note? Oh, look, there's a D root note on the 10th fret of the 6th string. So now I just move the whole thing up, and there's my D major chord. And actually, it is useful to have like a piece of software like this, because now you see the actual notes in the D major chord. So all it is D, F sharp, A, D, F sharp, A. So I would also be able to find these exact same shapes if let's say I'm working on the key of D now. So if I'm working on a song that's in the key of D, or the key of D is just weak for me, and I really, really need to know actually all of the triads that are in the key, right? This is just the process for one triad, but we also need to know our minor triads as well. That's one thing, is that the CAGED system it's primarily based on major triads, but it's a little more tricky when it starts coming to minor triads. And the thing is, if you just know the notes that are in the minor triads, then you don't have to go through a different process. It's the exact same process that we're using here. So the key of D major is going to have these notes in it. It's going to have D, E, F sharp, G, A, B, and C sharp. Okay? So now all of a sudden, if I do that exact same thing I did before, so I'll label each of these notes with a number. Remember, we started with the first note, we skipped the second note, went to the third note, and then we skipped the fourth note, went to the fifth note. Look, all of a sudden, now we have, now we just have that exact same chord, D, F sharp, and A. So now if I start going through and finding D, F sharp, A, D, F sharp, and A all over the entire fretboard, I'm going to get actually all these same shapes. And again, I know that this is not appealing to some of you. Some of you really don't want to go through this process. But when you truly understand why these chord shapes or scale shapes or pentatonic scale, whatever it is, when you understand why these shapes look like this, I'm going to sound like a broken record. You're going to understand them a lot better, and you're actually going to be able to memorize it with less work in the long term. Instead of just taking the same shape and going, okay, I got to just remember the shape. It looks this way. I don't really know why it looks this way, but I just got to remember this wacky pattern. It's not going to work as well, or at least it didn't work as well for me. I'm sure it works great for some people, but it doesn't work particularly that well for me. Let's actually give ourselves a little bit more space here. There we go, on the iPad. So this is what you should do. You should, if you want to, you can study the CAGED system too. That's fine. But for me, once I started going through and doing the following things, I was able to sort of by default, I already just knew the CAGED system. So let's just go through our practice checklist, okay? So that you can know exactly what to do when you get out of here. So one, you should memorize, hang on one second. Memorize the notes in all keys. Once you've done that, then memorize the chords in all keys. So each key has 7 chords in it. You should be able to list all of those off, right? The key of D major has D major, E minor, F sharp minor, G major, A major, B minor, and C sharp diminished. You should know that. The key of E major has E major, F sharp minor, G sharp minor, A major, B major, C sharp minor, D sharp diminished. You should be able to rattle that off with no problem. Actually, the cool thing is that this is something that you can practice anywhere. You can practice, you don't need a guitar. You can practice it while you're waiting in line to the grocery store. So once you've done that, then find all chords in all inversions across the fretboard. So, yeah, it's not quite as simple as, you know, just here's this magical shape, take this magical shape, and then you're going to be amazing at guitar. Sorry, I wish that it worked like that. But if you do those 3 things, you're going to see that essentially, you're not going to need the CAGED system anymore. You're just going to be able to actually know where these things are in the fretboard, and that's going to be the end of that. Then you'll start noticing, oh yeah, this kind of looks like a C chord, or oh, this kind of looks like an A chord, or oh, this kind of looks like a D chord. You're going to start to notice that, but after the fact, after you actually just figured it out for yourself. So with that being said, just for today's stream, if you want me to guide you step by step, and then it takes a little bit longer than just this 30-minute long stream here, but if you want me to guide you step by step through how to figure out playing in every single key, playing every single chord that you need to know across the entire fretboard, then you should go ahead and check out the Jamsville GPS Fretboard Fundamentals course. So just for this stream, I'm running 50% off sale. So if you go to jamsville.com/live, it'll automatically apply the 50% discount to you. And so you're going to learn how to master the fretboard. You're going to learn how to play in any key that you need to, any minor key, any major key. You're going to completely get all of this stuff down and completely out of the way. So for the rest of your life, you're never going to have to depend on some kind of weird shortcut that's confusing. You're going to know exactly what you're playing and why you're playing it. And that is one of the most valuable things that you could possibly develop in your guitar playing. Also, it comes with a whole book that gives you every single thing written out for you. Okay, so I'm going to show you how to figure all this stuff out yourself, but it's also going to, if you need it, I actually explained in the book that sort of the whole point is you want to try not to use the book. So I'm of a very, very strong opinion that if you can figure these things out without using a visual aid, it's a lot better. Because the whole point of using a book or any sort of sheet of music or anything like that is just to basically teach it to you. But none of this stuff is even remotely useful if we don't actually have it memorized and at our fingertips for when we need to use it in our playing. It's not going to work. You're not going to be able to go, hey, I want you to take a solo on this song, or somebody's going to ask you to take a solo on a song, and then you go, okay, let me pull out my scale book or something. No, it doesn't work like that. These scale books and charts and all that stuff, they're great if you don't know at first, but as soon as possible, we need to get rid of that. We need to get all this stuff in our head, and that's exactly what I show you how to do in the Jamsville GPS Fretboard Fundamentals course. Also, if you want to take a personalized lesson where I can show you exactly what you need to work on in your playing, we could come up with a custom game plan for you, completely free, actually. Just go to jamsville.com. There's a big button right there that says book in a lesson with me. You just go in there, you click the button, and then it's going to take you to the calendar, and all you do is just put in a time, find a time that works for you. You put in your email, put in a couple other pieces of information, and then automatically you're going to be booked in with me, and we will be able to have a really, really fun chat where we're going to be able to go over all the stuff that you want to do in your playing and come up with a game plan that's going to work for you. So if that's something you're interested in, also make sure you go to jamsville.com, find that big button that says book in a lesson with me. So let's go back to the chat here. Let's see, we got one person watching. I have to do more of these streams because, man, how is it possible to have 8,000 something subscribers and then hop on a stream and there's like nobody on here? That's because all these subscribers, actually, a lot of you guys are coming from the shorts, you know, and I'm starting to get mixed feelings on the shorts. I don't know if any of you watching found out about me from shorts. Let me know, because shorts are cool. They can teach you something pretty quickly, which is nice. We all like to save time, but there's not really any connection to be made there, And I notice it's almost kind of like this vanity thing. I almost don't even want to make the shorts anymore, even if you get 100,000 subscribers or something. Like, I'm gonna get 100,000 subscribers and then still get like 50 views on a video, or 200 views or something like that. It's just it's kind of silly. So whoever's watching right now, drop in the chat where you're watching from, or drop number 1, or just type something, mash on your keyboard and then press enter. Write something in the chat because I'm kind of trying to keep this going all here by myself. And if nobody else writes anything in the chat, I think I'm going to have to get off of here, because we've kind of gone over everything that I want to talk about in this video. I wanted to show you how it's like this cage system. It's just like memorizing. There we go. Brian, what's going on, man? Thank you for stopping by. Well, hey, man. We kind of got through a lot of the stuff already, but if people are coming on, I definitely want to hang out. If you have any questions, man, that you want me to answer, now's your time, because doing these live streams in here is pretty rare, pretty rare for me. I'm gonna try to start doing them a little bit more, because I think it's just fun. It's something that's that's a little bit nerve-wracking at first, but coming on here, I mean, if there's not that many people watching, I guess it also doesn't really matter. But that's cool, man. You're in Manteca, California. Awesome. For those of you who don't know, by the way, I'm in Dallas, Texas. So I'm a little bit ahead of you. It looks like, I guess you're probably about 2 hours behind where I'm at. But if you have any questions, what style of music do you play, Brian? Tell me. Let's see. I think you showed up. Been looking into the cage system. Nice. Yeah, man. A lot of people look into the cage system, and if you go back and start checking out, if you watch the replay, I talked about how I started checking out the cage system when I was a kid. Actually, I'm 29 right now, and I started probably checking it out when I was like 10 or 11. And it was it was very, very confusing, because let's go back over here, actually, because you're on here. You know what? This is this is what I want to show you. So yeah, we'll go back and you can check this out on the stream, or on the replay rather. But basically, the whole point that I was trying to make was that with the cage system, you kind of just have someone tell you, okay, well, you got to memorize the C shape, the A shape, the G shape, the E shape, and the D shape, right? And then you got to memorize taking these shapes and sort of spreading them out all over the fretboard. And while I'm sure that it works for some people, maybe it's worked for you. Let me know if it's have worked for you. I know that there's a lot of people who really stand by it, and when it comes to learning, everyone has different styles of learning, and I totally respect that. But for me, I need to understand why a piece of information exists, right? So that's sort of the message that I preach on this channel is, okay, if you want to learn a chord or scale, just learn the notes that are in that scale like everyone else does that plays like any other instrument. Or learn the notes that are in that chord and find it, okay? Find them all over the fretboard. So that's what we were kind of doing. We were actually working out these cage shapes by finding out, hey, okay, a C chord has the notes C, E, and G in it, and then bingo, we found those notes C, E, and G across the fretboard. So that's why we got this. These are all the natural notes across the fretboard. If you want to check out, if you don't know the notes across the fretboard, check out my video, the best way to learn the notes on the fretboard or memorize the fretboard. I think it's called something like that. Where I go into really detail where you can actually understand, like I'm sort of saying here, you actually understand why those notes are where they are as well. So it's really important to do that. There's a couple of ways that people learn the fretboard that I'm also not super, not a big fan of. Like, for example, let me show you this one. You might have tried something like this. Like, people will say, okay, practice picking one note and then finding it all over the fretboard. So let's say F. So then I go, okay, there's an F there, and there's an F here, 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 and there's an F here. And then, okay, well, I got to play through all these F notes. So I can actually do that, but it's not it's not because I actually practice doing that, funny enough. So again, I want to personally know, I want to know why is that F there? Don't just tell me that F is there. Why is that F there? Well, F is always going to be next to E, and it's also going to be next to G. Why is it going to be next to E and G? Well, because E and G are the previous and next notes in the alphabet after F, right? So it really, really helps if you have the context of where this information comes from to memorize it. I was never, ever able to do any of those note exercises like I just showed you. Because then all I'm doing is thinking of F. All right, well, I mean, I'm never going to actually play that, by the way. I mean, maybe it'd be cool to actually like shoehorn that into a solo or something, but you're not really going to do that in any kind of practical situation. But if you learn actually just all the natural notes on the fretboard, you're actually practicing a lot of different things at once. Number one, all the natural notes on the fretboard are actually the key of C. So anytime you play a song in the key of C, now I just messed it up for a second, thinking a lot of things at the same time. So anytime you play some kind of chord progression in the key of C, now all of a sudden I'm good on the notes in the key of C, of course. And then you're also memorizing the major scale patterns that you need to learn, because anytime you move any of those notes, like if I take one of my C major scale patterns and then move them all up 2 frets, well, now I got D major. So you're learning a lot of different things if you sort of cover all those notes all at once. Also, I highly recommend when you practice to try to improvise. So that's what this channel is really, really big on, is like how to improvise better. So the best way, I think, and the most simple and straightforward way, is just throw on a drum track. So kind of like this, I'll throw on this little drum track, and I might pick one string and go, okay, most people are pretty weak on, let's say, the second string. So I go, okay, I'm gonna improvise only in the second string, using only those natural notes. Right, something like that, where it's impossible for me to go through that process of improvising without also kind of memorizing where those notes are, right? Also, particularly on one string at a time, it's a little bit trickier to just memorize some kind of pattern of dots, right? A lot of the patterns of dots that we see are like the position patterns. You might know those position patterns. I'm gonna have to do a video on position patterns. Actually, I'm so sort of jaded by the getting stuck in the box of the position patterns. I haven't really covered it, but it is important to know your position patterns as well. I will definitely admit that. You got to know both. You got to know whatever key you're playing in, you have to know it on one string at a time, and then you also have to know those position patterns for sure, because that's sort of the ideal place you want to be, is have everything at your disposal. If you're just stuck playing on one string at a time, that's also not great. And if you're stuck playing in a position pattern, well, that's also going to hurt you. That's a situation that most people find themselves in, rather. So yeah, definitely make sure that you get those down in the key of C, and then actually understanding what notes are in the other keys that you want to play in will reveal the patterns to you. So that's my big message to all of you, Brian and everyone else. Yes, intervals. Definitely intervals are super duper important too. 100%. You want to understand when you're playing in the key of C, hey, C is 1, D is 2, E is 3, F is 4, G is 5, A is 6, B is 7. Because then when you are in a different key, then you start just thinking about, okay, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. That helps you memorize the shapes too, for sure. So, think we're gonna head off of here. It's starting to get pretty close to lunchtime over here in Texas. Thanks so much for hopping on, Brian. Sorry, is it Brian? I have a student named Bryant, actually. Maybe that's why I said that. But we will, unless anybody has any other questions. Looks like, well, we had 3 people watching at one point. That's pretty good. I'm pretty happy with that. But anyway, I think we're going to wrap it up. So just remember, if you want me to take you step by step on all this, go to jamsville.com/live and you can get my course, the Master Fretboard Jamsville GPS Fretboard Fundamentals course, for 50% off. Or if you want to book in a free Zoom lesson with me, then go ahead and go to jamsville.com, and right there you just go to the calendar and you'll be able to book in a free lesson with me. There's not much else to say. Completely no risk whatsoever. We'll just sit down and have a chat kind of like this, but I can actually see you and see you playing and give you actual feedback. Yeah, that's good. That's the one thing YouTube can't really do. YouTube can't give you feedback, can't listen to you playing. So anyway, cool. I've been focusing on the major scale lately, so you're talking about where I live today and my music. Awesome. Yeah, it's super important, man. Super important. Also, don't forget rhythm, Brian. That's why I was showing you the improvising with the drum track. Don't forget to, whenever you're learning any of this stuff, rhythm's always more important. You can play all the perfect notes and know every single note in the whole entire guitar fretboard. And if you don't play with good rhythm, it's not going to sound good. So the way that you get there faster is just by not separating those two things. Don't just sit there and do like note exercises. But as soon as you can, I know right in the beginning, if you don't know any of the stuff, I can't just throw on a drum track and have you do it. But as soon as you can, throw on some drums or throw on a metronome and make sure that you're practicing any of this stuff in time. It'll make you way better at actually applying it to actual music and then improvising with it too. Any new concept I learn, I make sure I improvise with it. If it's a chord, if I'm learning my chord inversions, let me switch camera angles. So if I'm learning my chord inversions, like even something simple like something like this, I'll throw on a drum track and then if it's two chords, a C and a G chord. Right, so now I'm actually making music with it, right? You're not making music with it if you're just sitting there, you know, just going. No, that's not music. That's, you know, that's something else, but that's not music. Music's got to have some kind of rhythm to it. At least most of the time. You can play rubato, and you know, there's always exceptions to everything. Actually, this song, it doesn't have a time to it. Yeah, well, people like to dance to rhythm. So, you know, 99% of really good music's gonna have good rhythm to it. Also, all right, I'm out of here. Smash the like button. Hit the like button. I forgot to tell you all that. Hit the like button. Every one of us says hit the like button. It really helps out. And yeah, I'm out. I'm going to have some lunch. Hope you all have a great rest of your day. And I will see you in next week's video. And we'll see if you all comment yes below if you want me to do another live stream. And if you don't want me to do a live stream, if you think that this was the worst thing ever, and you think I'm a complete idiot, and you think I suck at guitar, and you don't like me, you think I'm ugly, then comment no below. Okay, but if you want me to do another live stream and you liked it, then comment yes in the chat or in the comments below in the replay. All right, everybody, I'm out of here. Until next time, listen, learn, and jam.